G'day guys, I just wanted to do a video on installing an automatic locker. I recently put one in my Pajero. It's a Series 4. That's mine's an NS, but it'll be the same for all the new models. And I'll just get straight into it. You'll benefit by purchasing a few tools ready to go before you even start. You'll need a 36mm socket, one that you can use on your rattle gun. You'll need a rattle gun. You'll need some feeler gauges, and you'll need a punch of that size that I've got on the screen. If you can get one that's longer, it's even better, but this is the common size punch that you'll be able to get in a kit from Super Cheap, etc. And it's pretty reasonably priced, and then you can finish it off with a screwdriver, which I'll show you later. Okay, so take the front wheels off your Pajero, pardon me, and then get it on the jack stands. It's easiest to prop it up on that cross member, as you can see in the picture here. And you're going to want to remove the brake line clip with a screwdriver. Just wedge it in there and lift it up. This is another tool that's really handy. I'd rather use chisels than screwdrivers for this, because the chisels go really nicely into the dust seal, the hub seal there. So yeah, whack a chisel in there and pry that off. We'll use that chisel later as well, which I'll show you. So long nose pliers will get rid of that cotter pin, and then the little star-shaped retainer will just slide out, and it reveals the 36mm nut there. Use your rattle gun and the socket that you already bought. It's an unusual size, so you probably have to buy it individually. And then you've got some 12mm bolts at the top of the hub. So there's 3 of them. Just loosen them off for now. The steering arm has a castle nut on top. So what you do is you remove the cotter pin, wind the castle nut up so that it's above the top of the bolt, and then just hit it with a hammer, and the arm will that ball joint will just drop straight down. You don't have to hit this one very hard. Undo the 2, I think there's 17mm bolts that hold the brake caliper on, and get a big fat cable tie and cable tie that up to your spring. That'll keep it out the way without having to disconnect the brake line. Now you have to deal with this ball joint underneath. So let's start with, up here you've got an ABS sensor. That's a 12mm bolt. You'll need to undo that and gently use a screwdriver to push the sensor out from its little recess, and then cable tie that up with your brake caliper. And this ball joint at the bottom, which is a pain for most people because they don't want to, the ball joint doesn't want to let go. What you're going to do is remove the cotter pin, and I think it's a 24mm socket. So get a breaker bar on that and loosen the nut off, and do the same thing. So wind the castle nut out until it's past the end of the bolt. And here's the trick: is just get a little bottle jack it up on the castle nut so that there's a little bit of pressure. You don't want it to be lifting off the jack stands, but you want there to be a little bit of pressure. And actually don't hit the nut or anything, or you won't be able to with the bottle jack there anyway, but what you want to do is hit the side of the hub, actually on this metal piece here. Just hit that real hard a couple of times, and what you'll find is this whole ball joint will actually go up with the bottle jack and dislodge. You can use a like a fork tool to separate the ball joint, but you'll end up wrecking the boot. This way's heaps easier. Just do it that way. You'll see after you give the side a couple of hits, that ball joint has separated there, and then you can remove the castle nut, and then completely unscrew the 3 bolts that I showed you before, the 12mm bolts off the top of the hub, and you can remove the hub completely. Then it takes a bit of wiggling off the bottom ball joint, but the whole hub will fall off. Once the whole hub falls off, you just undo these 4 bolts off the CV joint, and the CV joint will pull out. So in Australia, this is the driver's side, which is the right hand side for the rest of the world. So yeah, that's the right hand side outer CV. That's the Mitsubishi genuine ones. I've found heaps better quality than, say, the eBay ones you order. So if you are going to change your CV joints, I'd highly recommend just getting genuine Mitsubishi, because the quality's there. They're like $380 each, but yeah, trust me, the eBay ones are rubbish. I've already had a set. While you're waiting, I guess, you just undo the bolt at the bottom of your diff housing and let all the oil out. There'll only be about 1.1 litres in there, so you don't need a big can for that. Just drain it into a pan. And back to the driver's side CV. This is a 20mm piece of square tube, but you can use any kind of pry bar. Just shove it behind the axle there and wedge it out, and you'll find it just pops out. There's a little C-clip that's retaining it, and that's why you need the leverage. Careful you don't lose those 4 bolts that'll be just hanging there. And then you pull it out. That's the inner CV. You'll see on the end there, that's the C-clip that retains it. That's it there, actually. I forgot I took that pic. But yeah, that's the C-clip that you basically need to yank or lever on to be able to pull it out. These are the 4 airlines. I've marked them with a paint pen, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So mark them so you don't get them confused. And while you're there, disconnect this wire, which is sort of on the top side of the axle. And just jumping across to the other side, so this is the passenger side. The actual diff as well, you need to disconnect the drive shaft. So there's 4 bolts right here. You just spin the drive shaft and undo them as you're spinning it, sort of thing, so that you've got easy access to them bolts. I don't know why I took that pic. Oh yeah, it was a hot day. It was like 40 degrees. I was trying to keep out of the shade, or keep out of the sun rather. Yeah, so where are we? Yeah, this is the passenger side. So the CV on this side, the process of removing the hub is exactly the same as the driver side that I just showed you. So once you move the hub out of the way, the CV will just be hanging like that. All you do is grab the CV, so probably one hand on this section CV and one on the center, and just yank it, just pull it really hard, and it'll break this. It won't break, but it'll cause the snap ring to reduce in size, and then you can pull the CV out, which I'll show you in a sec. So that's it there. You just yank it, and up this end is that snap ring, the C-clip that's holding that whole CV in. It just needs a bit of a shove to be able to pull it out. That's the drive shaft disconnected now. This is sort of from the front looking into this is the diff housing here. You've got to remove this bolt from this passenger side hole at the front, and then do the same on the driver's side. This is sort of, there's a lot of different ways to do this. You can remove the whole carrier out of the car, but I'm cheating because I think it's easier just to pivot the diff housing down so that you can take the cover off and then remove the center. So when you undo them 2 bolts, the whole diff is going to pivot down. That's the bolts you're removing, so they're tapered so that they're easy to get back in anyway. That's the diff cover. So I've just removed the breather. So yeah, just disconnect that from this little pipe here. Just stick a screwdriver up it and kind of force it and wiggle it at the same time. And then once you've done that, you can remove the bolts from around the cover, diff cover, revealing the center. That's just a different view, but yeah. Now let me fast forward a little bit because these pictures aren't really in order. Okay, this is so this is the clutch system for your diff. You're going to undo these 4 bolts that were here, and what will happen is this tube that's on the driver's side you'll be able to pull it out and it'll pivot down. The actuator, which is under this rubber boot, actually has like an elbow So you can let it hang there, but you need to be careful that you don't damage that actuator uni joint there. Get your chisel that we used before and just slowly and gently drive it in between here, because the glue is what's the gasket is what's holding that in place. It's just like Sikaflex sort of stuff. Once you do that, you'll be able to gently remove this clutch assembly. Now that sort of planetary gear there is only being held in by the fork, so it may fall out and roll out. If you do it gently, you should be able to keep it all in place. I know when I was researching this before I did it, that this part really looked daunting, but as long as you do it gently and you don't get sand and everything on everything, you'll be able to just put that on the floor on a rag and it'll be fine. When you do remove that, so this is the actual spindle that goes into the diff center. You just grab that. Oh, sorry, that's the that's the assembly, the tube just resting on the floor there. And yeah, back to this spindle, you'll be able to pull that out and just keep that clean. It's quite a beefy looking little spindle, so I don't think that's going to be a weak point once the locker's fitted. And then what you do, this is where I have to rewind a little bit. So we're back to the diff center. So you're going to remove these bearing cap bolts. So you want to keep them in order. You want to either put them on a mat in order or label them with a texture or whatever you have to do. This right hand cap is shaped a certain way, and so is the left, so you can't get them, you don't want to get them the wrong way around. They're also, the race will be used to the bearing that's on that side, so yeah, keep them in order, remove them, and be very careful, because now the diff center can fall out. It won't though. You'll need to pry it out with a little pry bar or a screwdriver and probably some massaging on the pry bar to wedge it out. Because you're going to get rid of these spider gears, you can put a screwdriver or a pry bar in there and wedge it out off the carrier. That's the easiest way, because we're going to throw the spider gears in the bin anyway. But yeah, you need to get that center out. Just grab the crown gear there and yank it, and it should just fall out. But when you do so, just realize that each of the bearings has a shim, and then in the race, so that's the shim there and that's the race, so you want to keep them on the correct sides as well, so keep them in order. This is where, if you're lucky enough to have a vise, you would put your the diff center in a vise, because we need to undo these bolts. These bolts are notoriously hard to undo. A rattle gun is your best option, or a really big breaker bar if you've got a vise, but the rattle gun's good if you don't have a vise, and that's what I'm sort of catering to, is the DIY guy who doesn't have all the best tools. So undo them bolts, keep them clean. There will be some form of Loctite holding them in as well, so if powder comes out with it, don't worry, you haven't stripped it. It's just the Mitsubishi version of Loctite they've used. And then get your sexy assistant to get a razor blade and scrape all the gasket off the diff housing, because we're going to have to put fresh gasket glue onto that. So you need to scrape it off the diff side and the cover, which is over here, as well as that, and also on the left side where we separated the clutch, that needs to be cleaned as well. So back to the diff center, there's a pin. This is the big one's called cross shaft. This is the cross shaft pin that goes in here. You'll see it's been dented or deliberately indented to stop the pin from falling out. What we're going to do is use that punch that I said you would need at the start of the video, and you need to punch it out this way. So, because the pin only goes in one way, it's tapered. So stick your punch in there and punch the pin out. Punch it through that way, and what will happen is you're going to run out of punch. The pin is too long, like it's quite a long pin. So go as far as you can with the punch, and then that's the punch again for those you want to look for the size. The longer the better though. But yeah, finish it off with a screwdriver. So you'll need to punch the last 1 centimetre out roughly with a screwdriver. Once you do, you just stick your finger in one side and push the cross shaft out. And once the cross shaft's out, you can rotate those spider gears and pull them out. They're the 4 gears there. We don't need them anymore because we've got the Lokka. I just want to talk about Lokka brands for a minute. So I've done quite a few of the Spartan brand, which they're from the USA. I really like their brand. I've had them for years. They're robust, good quality, made in USA, good quality. The Australian, so the 4-drive systems, the Lokka, Lokka, they're not too bad, but I found the build, it wasn't as good as the American one because you have to put the pins and the springs in manually. Like the American ones, they're already pre-made and you just pull a tab. I'll show you in a minute anyway. So that's the center with the spider gears removed. On the back, so there's 2 of them spider gears have a cup washer, so it's shaped like a concave, and then 2 of them have flat washers. You need those flat washers, so grab them. You'll need a screwdriver to get them off because the oil holds them onto the spider gear. But you need them to use with your Lokka. What you do is you put that shim on one side, and then you put this piece of the Lokka in. Grease where the splines are going to go for the CV, so grease it up. The grease is important because you'll find your CV doesn't want to go in easily. You need that grease. And these are the other 2 pieces of the one side. So I've greased them all up, and that's the actual flat washer attached to that piece. So that's underneath this. But yeah, that's it all greased up. See this piece here. So the open side needs to go, the open, so the spline spacer recess needs to face the axle gear. So I'll show you. So this is the opposite side of it. This bit's flat, and the side that I just showed you is facing downwards. What you're going to do is, so you put this, you have to do it in order. So put the bottom piece on, then this spacer, then the top piece, and then the spacer, and then shove the cross shaft in. Now this isn't the actual assembly. This is, we need to take some measurements here for your warranty. If you're not fussed about warranty or even checking clearances, I know some guys just whack them in and they work, but I'll show you how to do it with the taking the measurements anyway. So pretty much what you need to do with this, you need to stick the feeler gauges in between the cross shaft and the spacer, and you need to take that measurement. Now I've got the paperwork here in front of me, and that measurement in between here, so in between the cross shaft and the spacer, it needs to be between 6 thou and 20 thou of an inch, which I'll show you I'll actually get a photo of this to make it easier. So anyway, you take that measurement on the left side, and on this side, left side, and then the right side, and you just note down those measurements. And then you can put this section of the locker in. So this goes on top of that spacer that I just showed you. Like that. So it's all greased up, the teeth are greased up, and what you're going to do is, so that's the bottom half, and then you're going to build the top half, shove the cross shaft in, and then you need to take this measurement. So this measurement here, they call it the intercam spacing measurement, and this needs to be between 145 thou and 165 thou of an inch. So my one, I'll show you in a sec. I'll get a photo of this. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so the spacer to cross shaft clearance, that's what mine was, left side, right side, so 18 and 19 thou of an inch. and the intercam clearance, which was this. That's there's 4 or 5 feeler gauges in there, adds up to 152 thou of an inch, which is within range, so that's good. They make you fill this stuff out for your warranty in case something goes boom inside your diff while you're driving. You might be able to get back to 4-wheel drive systems or whoever your locker is made by, and just, yeah, might be able to work something out with them. For the record, this is a 4-wheel drive systems one I put in. So that's a pin and a spring. Now on the Spartan brand, these are pre-assembled in a clever way, and you just put them in and pull the tab out and they spring apart. This is the Australian 4-wheel drive systems Lokka brand, so you have to do it yourself. The nipple of the pin needs to go towards the spring like that, and what you do is you put the pin in this side of the hole with the nipple facing up, and then you've got to wedge the spring in with a little screwdriver. If it's inverted, because every second hole will be like this, then all you do is grease the pin up and then shove it up in the hole and it'll stay there, and then you put the spring in this side with your screwdriver. When it's done properly, the spring will be recessed in that little hole and the pin will be recessed in the longer hole. So it'll look like that. So yeah, one side's on the top and one's on the bottom, as I was saying before. And then what you do is you spin this whole locker around so that the cross shaft recess lines up with the outside. And then what you're going to do is they supply, every kit comes with a new cross shaft. So use the cross shaft they supply, put it in, and then you're going to get that tapered side of the cross shaft pin and basically hammer it back in. So yeah, start like that and gently hammer it back in, and at the end use your punch to dent over the end of the hole so the pin can't come out. Now I should have mentioned the crown wheel when you remove it. So that was those bolts that I said were notoriously hard to get off. You need to mark the crown wheel position before you do. I hope that you did that. I should have really said to do that, but yeah. And you need to Loctite the bolts again after you've cleaned them, and then put all them bolts back in, so that your crown wheel gear is back onto the diff center. I didn't take a photo of that, but yeah, this is the eBay style CVs that I was talking about that are no good. So for a start, you can see the ABS ring is too fat, and it's not in the same position as the Mitsubishi one. So when you fit these eBay CVs, you'll get an ABS light on your dash because the sensor can't sense that ring gear. It's too far away from it. So I'm just giving you a heads up, because a lot of guys will change your CVs at the same time if you're clever, because they're fairly cheap, and maintenance-wise, that's good to do so while you've got everything else out. But yeah, avoid the eBay ones. You've got to put gasket glue on your clutch when you put it back together, as well as the housing. Be generous, because there's no downside to it and you don't want it leaking after you put it back together. But pretty much the assembly is the same in reverse. So you bolt the bearing caps back in and put everything back together. Now your diff holds 1.15 litres, which is not a bad figure if you have to go buy oil, because a bottle of oil will run you about $17 for a 1 litre. Yeah, it depends if you want to buy 2 bottles or whatever, but you only need 1.15 litres in the housing. And that's the locker all snug in there, ready to dominate some sand dunes. That's the last picture I took, but I'll do another video once I go out bush or in the dunes and show you the difference with the locker versus before, because I've got footage of the car before. Why would you want to put a locker in? Talk about that for a minute. So I guess the biggest thing is when you're doing dune climbs or sand driving, you want to keep momentum, and the Mitsubishi system as you're driving along, it tries to brake. When it senses loss of traction on one wheel, it'll use its system to brake the wheel to give the other wheel more traction. I mean, that's what traction control is. What you're going to want to do now that you've got a locker, essentially your traction control on the front is not something you need anymore. You don't want the car to be braking using the brakes at all, which allows you to keep momentum instead of the car trying to brake one wheel and do its thing. So it makes your car more effective on sand, and it certainly makes it more effective on things like mud and rock climbing, because of course if you lift a wheel with a locker, both wheels are going to spin in unison, even if you've lifted a wheel, and you'll be able to just crawl, which I really like, crawl driving rather than just sending it every time. It's better for your drive line, and just crawling around in low ratio is my style of driving. There is a video, I did make another video on how to disable the traction control. So once you've fitted your diff locker, you're going to want to turn off that Mitsubishi system. There's not too much involved, but please check out my other video. It's step by step on how to turn off the Mitsubishi traction control system now that you've got your locker. Whether you need to do so or not, I'm yet to determine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a video, go out, leave the traction control on, and see what it does with the locker in place. Given that both the wheels are going to turn in unison, the system shouldn't sense that one wheel is losing traction. So leaving traction control on might be a way of controlling your back wheels. So, I think I'm just going to turn traction control off completely when I use the locker, just out of a sense of not wanting the system to use the brakes at all, because I really don't need to. If you've never driven with a locker before as well, there is some things to expect with an automatic locker that don't apply to, say, an E-locker in Eaton or like a ARB and that. They don't experience this, but with an auto locker, so your two front wheels are going to want to just not differentiate. They can, because these two teeth can pass over each other, which in other people's videos you can look it up. Essentially when you turn, there'll be like a click, click, click. It sort of sounds like CVs, but it's not. It's the teeth of the locker passing over because the system needs to differentiate. But essentially it doesn't want to differentiate, especially on hard ground, because both your wheels want to turn at the same rate. The effect of this when you're driving is you're going to feel that the steering wheel is hard to turn, so it's going to want to sit in the centered position. And when you do turn, it's not difficult to turn, but you can feel resistance. It doesn't want to turn, it wants to go straight. So just consider that, I don't know, something to expect if you've never had an automatic locker before. It doesn't bother me one bit. Turning is a little bit harder to turn, but oh man, the effect of traction with the automatic locker is amazing. If you've chat to a mate who's got one, they'll do nothing but try and sell you one. So they really are good bang for buck, and you can pick one up for under $400 now, which if you're trying to get an E-locker or a ARB locker, I mean, kiss at least $1,000 goodbye, probably more once you've fitted it, whereas this automatic locker, $400, do it yourself, follow this video and profit. Alright, thanks for watching. Sorry this video is really long, but I just wanted to go and explain a few things at the end. Anyway, yeah, please subscribe. Cheers boys.